It began with a shadow. Not a drifting cloud or a bird in flight, but a massive shape, silent and still, blotting out the stars as it hovered above the earth. No engine roared. No warning came. Just the sight of it, dark, jagged, impossibly huge, looming against the midnight sky like some ancient god returned to reclaim its throne. People across the world froze, necks craned, eyes wide, hearts pounding in their chests. Cameras trembled in shaking hands. Children cried. Adults forgot how to breathe. Above every major city on the planet, the same shape had appeared. A floating colossus, towering, unmoving, and terrifying in its silence. It hung in the sky like judgment itself, an unknown giant that had arrived not in fire and fury, but in chilling, deliberate quiet. The world named it the Sky Colossus. Governments scrambled. Satellites were redirected. Fighter jets streaked toward it only to be swallowed whole by its shadow and never return. Radar systems couldn't penetrate it. No signal bounced back. No message was sent. The Sky Colossus made no demands. It simply was. And for 7 days it didn't move. People stopped going to work. Cities emptied. Highways clogged with panicked families heading anywhere but the places under that monstrous hovering thing. News anchors whispered like they were standing at a funeral. Priests opened their doors to crowds that hadn't prayed in years. Then on the 8th day it moved. It descended slowly, so slowly it took nearly an hour to notice, but it came down. Not fast. Not sudden. But deliberate. Like it had all the time in the world. And when it touched the earth, it didn't crash or land. It embedded itself. That's when things changed. Where it settled, the land shifted. Grass turned gray. Water boiled without heat. Birds that flew too close fell from the sky, bones twisted, eyes melted. The air itself tasted wrong, metallic and sharp like blood and burnt wires. The people who remained nearby either disappeared or changed. Survivors from those first encounters told stories of glowing figures, of voices whispering in languages they didn't understand but somehow felt. They spoke of a strange pull, like gravity but emotional, like the Colossus knew your fears, your pain, your shame. It didn't speak to them, it sensed them. And it pressed those feelings down until some broke and others bent. That was 5 months ago. Now the world is divided. Around the Sky Colossus lies a growing dead zone, miles wide, expanding inch by inch every day. Nothing grows there. No signals escape it. Drones die. Data corrupts. Planes reroute around it. And the people who venture in, soldiers, scientists, seekers, they either vanish or return forever changed. Most governments have stopped trying. But not everyone has given up. In a small underground compound just outside the quarantine line, a team of human specialists, scientists, engineers, ex-military, and survivors have formed an unofficial coalition. They don't work for a country or a company. They answer to no one but themselves. They call themselves the Line. They believe the Sky Colossus is not an invader. They believe it's a message. And they think they've found a way to talk back. The bunker was cold. Not the natural kind of cold from concrete and distance from the sun, but an artificial cold, regulated, clinical. The kind that made your teeth ache and your nerves buzz. Rows of screens lined the far wall, each flickering with data, symbols, and distorted visuals of the anomaly outside. Sitting at one of the consoles was a woman with deep lines around her eyes and a gaze that hadn't blinked in hours. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even acknowledged the growing tension in the room. She just stared. "You should eat," a voice said behind her. Quiet. Cautious. "I'm fine," she answered. "You said that yesterday too." She didn't turn. "I was fine yesterday." The man behind her stepped closer. He was older, tall, his beard threaded with gray. His name was Cole. He'd been a firefighter before all of this, before the Colossus came. Now he was their field lead. "Something's changed, hasn't it?" he asked. She nodded. Just once. The woman's name was Riva. Before the Sky Colossus, she'd been one of the lead AI architects at a major defense firm. She'd designed systems that could think faster than 100 people combined. But even those systems couldn't make sense of what they were seeing now. "The patterns," she said, finally turning, "they're shifting. It's subtle, but they're not random." Cole frowned. "You think it's trying to talk?" "No. I think it already is. We're just too small to understand." Another screen lit up with a low tone. A different frequency. A pulse. Cole leaned in. "That's new." Riva nodded. Her voice lowered, almost reverent. "It's not noise. It's structured. Time. Like a heartbeat." "From the Colossus?" "Yes." Her fingers danced across the keys. "But it's not organic. It's coded. This isn't just a ship or a machine. It's something else. Behind them, another person entered the room. Short, tense, and twitchy. His name was Kern. He used to work for the European Space Agency, and he didn't believe in anything he couldn't measure. Tell me it's not changing again, Kern said, already knowing the answer. Riva didn't reply. She just pointed to the screen. The pulse had begun to form shapes now. Not visual ones. Mathematical. Recursive loops, shifting spirals, binary fractals. I've seen that pattern, Kern muttered. On the outer edge of the crater. The ones who returned, some of them had those shapes scratched into their skin. Cole's eyes narrowed. You think they were marked? I think they were used. The room fell silent. Outside, the low hum of the Colossus could be felt even through the reinforced walls, an ever-present vibration just beneath the threshold of hearing. Like the earth itself was holding its breath. Somewhere near the border of the dead zone, a scavenger named Ilya crouched in the ruins of an old gas station. He wasn't supposed to be this close. No one was, but desperation didn't follow rules. His sister was sick. Whatever radiation or field the Colossus gave off, it had changed her. Skin pale, eyes glowing faintly at night, a voice that echoed even when she whispered. And yet, she was still his sister. The doctors had given up. The officials turned him away. But he'd heard rumors. People said there were objects, strange tech scattered near the Colossus's perimeter. Leftovers, gifts, traps. No one knew. But some said they could heal. Change you back. He didn't believe in miracles. But he believed in his sister. As he moved through the wreckage, he felt the air tighten, like a hand closing around his lungs. He didn't cough. Couldn't. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. No insects. No wind. Just that hum. And then he saw it. Floating just a few feet off the ground was a shard of metal, smooth, humming softly, etched with the same spirals Kern had spoken of. It wasn't resting on anything. It floated, as if gravity had given up on it. Ilya reached for it slowly. The second his fingers brushed the surface, a voice echoed in his skull. Not words. Feelings. Memories. A flood of emotion so intense it knocked him off his feet. He saw a city burning. He saw the Colossus splitting open. He saw 1,000 eyes watching him from the sky. And he felt something worse than fear. Recognition. Back at the compound, alarms blared. Riva spun around. We've got a breach. Kern pulled up the feed. Someone's in the outer ring. He touched something. Cole stared at the screen. Get a drone in the air now. Too late, Riva whispered. The pulse from the Colossus had stopped. In its place was silence. Then the ground began to shake. Outside, the sky above the Colossus rippled. Not a storm. Not lightning. A tear. A crack opened across the atmosphere, and from it came a beam of light. Not bright, not blinding, but deep and cold, like moonlight sharpened into a blade. It struck the earth just beyond the Colossus, forming a second crater. And something stepped through. The quake lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like minutes. Monitors flickered. Lights dimmed. The walls of the underground compound groaned under the weight of pressure no one could explain. Riva gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. That wasn't a tectonic shift. No, Cole muttered. That came from it. They all turned to the main screen, where a satellite feed tried to lock onto the newly formed crater. Static interfered, but enough details slipped through: blackened soil, scorched trees, and something at the center, moving. Kern swore under his breath. Something came out of that beam. Cole leaned in. Is it mechanical? Riva shook her head. I don't know. It's wrong. Whatever it is, it's not human. But it's not a drone either. It's walking. Breathing. Changing the atmosphere as it moves. Outside, the air thickened across the quarantine zone. Power lines surged. Radios filled with strange whispers that weren't quite voices. And the world, once again, held its breath. Miles away, Ilya crawled from behind the shattered remains of a billboard. Blood dripped from his forehead where debris had struck him, but his eyes weren't focused on his injuries. They were locked on the thing now rising from the center of the blast. At first he thought it was a person. Then it stood taller. Taller than a 2-story building, with limbs that shimmered like heated glass and a face that never stopped shifting. Not morphing between features, just changing continuously. 1 second it resembled a man, then a child, then something reptilian and ancient. It had no eyes, yet Ilya felt its gaze. No mouth, yet he felt it speak. Or rather, he felt known. His knees buckled. A pressure pushed into his skull as if his thoughts were being unspooled like thread. His sister's face flashed in his mind. Her laugh. The song she used to hum before she got sick. Then came the voice. Not in his ears. In his chest. What you break, we remember. Ilya screamed. Back in the bunker, Riva's systems began to fail, one by one. Not from damage. Not from overload. From contact. What's happening to the feed? Kern barked. It's not interference. It's rejection, Riva replied, frantically typing. It's pushing us out. Like it knows we're watching. You said this thing might be communication, Cole said. So maybe now it's responding. Riva turned slowly to face him. Then it's not responding with words. It's responding with a warning. Kern pointed at the live feed, or what was left of it. The crater is expanding. And it was growing outward like ink spreading through paper. Trees were wilting instantly. Soil was fracturing. Everything organic near the epicenter was dying, or worse, changing. Riva whispered, it's not just a creature. It's an extension. A fragment of the Colossus. Cole stiffened. A scout. Or a probe. Maybe even a piece of its memory. Kern looked at them both. You're saying it remembers us? From what? We've never seen anything like this before. Riva hesitated. What if we have? Just not in our time. The archive room was silent. Shelves of dusty files lined the walls. Paper documents, printed photographs, handwritten notes. Things too old or too strange for digital storage. Riva moved through them like a ghost, pulling records without explanation. Cole followed, arms crossed. What are you looking for? There was a project during the Cold War. Top secret. Buried even from the military. Something about high-atmosphere anomalies, visits, lights, magnetic storms. UFOs. Not exactly. They called it Operation Heron. She pulled a file marked with red ink and set it on the table. Inside were yellowed pages, blurry photographs of something high above Earth, massive, cloaked in cloud. The descriptions were vague, but one word kept appearing. Colossus. Cole leaned over the photos. You think this happened before? I think something like it did. But maybe we did something back then, something we weren't supposed to. She flipped to the last page. It wasn't a report. It was a warning scribbled in a scientist's hand. It does not speak. It waits. It tests. And when it returns, it will not ask questions. Ilya stumbled back toward the forest, clutching the metal shard tight in his hand. He should have dropped it. It burned. It pulsed. But something told him not to let go, not yet. The figure from the crater was walking now, its form stabilizing, shedding its shifting faces until it looked almost human. Its skin was ash-colored, veined with light that pulsed like veins. No clothing. No armor. Just itself. And as it walked, the world around it bent. Trees leaned. Wind reversed. Birds took off in silence. Ilya ducked low, his breath ragged, his heart screaming to run. But then something strange happened. The shard in his hand stopped burning. And the thing stopped walking. It turned its head, sensing the object in his hand. No eyes, yet it saw him. It raised one long arm and pointed, not at Ilya but at the shard. Return what was taken, it said, voice like wind through stone. I don't understand. Ilya cried out. But deep down, something inside him did. He didn't just carry a piece of it. He carried a memory. Back at the compound, Riva connected the dots faster than anyone else. The shard, she said, pulling up an old image. There's more than one. They're scattered, intentionally. Left behind after the last contact. Kern was pacing now, fuming. So they're like beacons? No, Riva said. They're locks. Cole blinked. Locks? For what? The Colossus wasn't just dormant. It was sealed. And now, someone's opening it. The temperature in the room dropped. Who? Kern asked, barely whispering. Riva didn't answer. She just stared at the growing spiral on the map. Ilya felt it before he saw it, the shard in his hand beginning to vibrate, not wildly but rhythmically, like it was syncing with something. With him. The voice returned. You were meant to forget. But some things remember through blood. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by visions not his own. Cities from another age. Towering spires made of crystal and metal. Humans but not like now. Taller. Brighter. With eyes like the stars. A war. A betrayal. A sacrifice. And then, a silence so deep it carved history in half. In the compound, alarms blared again. Second breach, Riva said. Another shard just activated. Where? Kern pointed. Central Africa. Then one in Siberia. Then, oh God, one near Tokyo. They're waking up, Riva whispered. All of them. Cole's voice was like gravel. What happens when they all unlock? Riva looked up, her face pale. The Sky Colossus won't need to descend. It'll open. From the inside. In orbit above Earth, the International Space Station caught the first visual. The Sky Colossus was no longer inert. Its surface, once dull and matte, now shimmered with movement. Thousands of small shifting plates began to rotate, forming a massive spiral across its core. And then, a light. Not blinding, not searing, but infinite. A doorway. And behind it, not stars. Not space. But another sky. Riva sat in silence, her hand hovering over the keyboard, listening to the soft beeping of systems barely holding together. There was something about the light now pulsing from the orbital object. Something ancient and intimate, like the sound of a name you've forgotten but still recognize. Kern leaned against the steel bulkhead, staring at her like he needed her to say it, to admit what they were all starting to suspect. "This isn't first contact," he said quietly. Riva didn't look at him. "No." Cole's voice cut through from the far end of the room. "Then when was it?" She turned toward him. "We thought we were alone. For centuries we've been building, growing, believing that the sky was ours to claim. But we were warned. Not through signals, not through invasion, through memory. Through things we left buried because we didn't want to understand them." He frowned. "Things like that shard?" Riva nodded slowly. "And the others?" Ilya walked like a man in a dream, the burned metal shard still wrapped in cloth and tucked against his chest. The figure no longer followed him, not physically. But it never truly left. He could feel it inside his thoughts, brushing against memories he hadn't touched in years. The forest around him was darker now. Quiet. Like the trees were listening. He stopped at a river's edge, knees weak, face drawn pale. He looked into the water, half expecting his reflection to be gone. But it was there. His face just his. Then the whisper again, faint but present. "To remember is to return." The river's surface rippled. For a moment he saw not his own reflection but another, him but younger. A child clutching his mother's hand, looking up at the night sky with eyes full of wonder. And then, in the stars, a shape. He gasped, stepping back from the edge. He'd seen it before. Not days ago. Not weeks. Years. As a child. He'd drawn it once, in crayon, on the walls of his room. His parents thought it was just imagination. The compound's lights flickered again, and Riva knew it was only a matter of time before power gave out completely. They were never meant to face something like this. Not with weapons. Not with politics. This wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. "I need access to the old vault," she said suddenly, standing up. Cole looked confused. "The cold storage files? You said those were corrupted." "Only partially. The military scrapped the Project Heron archives after the funding dried up, but not before backups were taken. I didn't see it before. I wasn't looking at the right patterns. But now, I think some of those files were disguised, written in parallel languages, using overlapping timelines." Kern stared. "You're saying they were hiding them even from themselves? Maybe they were trying to forget." She pulled a cable from the terminal and connected it to the external drive beneath the console. The screen shimmered, lines of broken code spilling across until a single image locked into place. Not a diagram. Not a satellite scan. A sketch, hand-drawn. It showed the Sky Colossus, clear as day, hanging above a different Earth. One with fewer cities. Less noise. But still ours. At the bottom, a single phrase, "We begged it not to leave." Cole blinked. "What does that mean?" Riva stared at the line, a chill crawling up her spine. "I don't think it came to conquer us." "Then what?" She turned slowly. "I think it came to take us with it. And we refused." In a quiet hospital room hundreds of miles from the epicenter, a young woman named Tara sat by her father's bedside. He had been unconscious for weeks, ever since the electrical storm that knocked out half the grid. The doctor said his mind was intact but trapped, like something was holding it still. She spoke to him every day. Told him about the news, the cities evacuating, the odd glow in the skies. Today she told him about the Sky Colossus. How people were panicking. How some were kneeling outside, waiting, praying. And then for the first time in weeks he moved. His fingers twitched. His lips parted. "Tara," he whispered. Her heart leapt. "Dad? I'm here." He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed closed but his voice was clear. "It's remembering us." "What is?" "The sky. The being above. It's not looking down. It's looking inward." He paused, trembling. "It's looking for the ones it left behind." Back in the compound, Riva dug deeper into the archives, eyes scanning faster now. Cole stood behind her, watching the files unfold. photographs, sketches, journal entries. She paused at one note, barely legible. We built the locks using resonance anchors, 5 in total. Each one tuned to a part of the Colossus's memory core. We thought it was dead. We didn't realize it was dreaming. Cole spoke softly. And now it's waking up. Riva whispered, no. We are. That's what it's been waiting for. Kern stepped closer. You think this thing came here for us? I think we were part of it once. I think we left it behind. Or maybe we were supposed to join it, and we changed our minds. And the shards? Cole asked. Reminders. Not just to signal it, but to tether us to its return. Kern's face was pale. Then why now? Why come back at all? Riva looked down at the image on screen, a planet in flames with the Colossus hovering above it. Because the clock ran out. In Tokyo, the shard in the museum vault began to pulse. Scientists had quarantined it weeks ago when they realized it was emitting low-frequency vibrations. But now it shivered with force. Cracks spread across the concrete floor. Screams echoed through the corridor as light poured from the fissures. The shard lifted itself into the air. Guards aimed rifles. But before they could fire, a wave of silence struck. Everyone fell to their knees. Not in pain. In memory. Visions played behind their eyes. Other cities, other skies, other lifetimes. And in each the same figure. Not the Colossus. Not the probe. A girl walking barefoot through a field of glass, holding a metal shard close to her heart. One of the scientists wept without knowing why. In the compound the countdown began. Not from a weapon. From the Colossus itself. Across the globe those with shards began to feel it. Vibrations in their bones. Flashes of places they'd never visited. Languages they'd never learned flowing through their dreams. Ilya fell to his knees in the field, eyes wide. The shard no longer burned, it hummed. He looked up at the sky. The clouds had parted, revealing the full shape of the Colossus for the first time. It wasn't just metal. It was alive. Panels moved like breathing lungs. The spiral glowed with light that bent around itself. And deep within something turned, a slow rotation, patient and massive. And for one brief moment, Ilya understood. The Colossus didn't arrive to take from Earth. It came to recover what was lost. Tara's father sat upright now, his voice firmer, eyes still closed. We were part of it once. Humanity wasn't born here. We were planted. A seed. Tara felt her breath catch. A seed for what? He turned his face toward her. To carry memory. To learn suffering. To evolve emotion. But why? She asked. His eyes opened, glowing faintly. Because the Colossus couldn't. It needed something it didn't have. It needed us to grow what it couldn't create. Tara stepped back. And now? It's come back to see what we became. In the bunker, power surged. The air grew heavy. Riva stared at the final file that just decrypted. It was a transmission log. Time-stamped 1979. It contained a message sent from Earth to the Colossus just before it vanished. We are not ready. We choose to remain. A second line followed. Forgive us. Come back when we've learned. Riva's voice broke. Someone knew. Someone begged it to return. Cole stepped forward. Then this is our test. No, she said, standing up. This is our answer. Kern shook his head. To what? To what happens when we forget what we are. And far above the world, the Colossus spun slightly faster. Its spiral now fully open, light pulsing in a rhythm that echoed in every major city. It wasn't a beacon. It was a door. And through that door came a shape. Not a ship. Not a creature. A shadow. A second Colossus, smaller, faster, emerging from within the first, aimed directly at Earth. The world held its breath. Every camera pointed skyward, every radar locked onto the approaching shape. It didn't move fast. It didn't need to. The second structure drifted down through the atmosphere like it had done this before, like Earth was only one stop in a long return. It was smaller than the Sky Colossus but just as alien, just as unknowable. And it moved like it recognized where it was going. A perfect trajectory. No resistance. Not from gravity. Not from humans. In command centers buried beneath mountains, generals asked for launch codes. Satellites were turned, weapons prepared. But no one gave the order to fire. Not yet. Because no one understood what it was. The smaller vessel didn't radiate heat. It didn't send messages. It only pulsed. Slowly. Rhythmically. And it triggered something deep inside the people who still held the shards. Across the world, they began to speak in unison. We are the echoes. In New York, a woman collapsed on a train platform, whispering it between shallow breaths. In a research ship near the South Pole, a man fell to his knees and set it to the ice. In the compound, Ilya looked at Riva, his voice distant. It's asking us to remember. All of us. Riva clenched her fists. Remember what? Kern stared at the monitors, sweat running down his brow. What we gave up. The smaller object reached Earth's lower orbit, casting a second shadow on the planet. Not over the oceans. Not the poles. It drifted inland, directly above the old rift zone. Decades ago, that region had been declared unstable and abandoned. Earthquakes, energy bursts, data anomalies. The official reports blamed magnetic faults. Riva now knew better. The Colossus had been here before. It had left a mark. She pulled up the old maps, overlaying them with the current scans. The shape matched. Not just similar, exact. The small vessel was returning to the exact point of departure. It's not attacking, she said. It's coming home. But why now? Cole asked. Why wait all these years? Because we forgot who we were, she replied. And now it's reminding us. Lights inside the vessel began to flicker. The signals changed. No longer just pulses. They were patterns. Tones. Sounds humans could almost recognize. Almost. Someone needs to answer it, Kern said. If this is a question, someone has to respond. Riva nodded slowly. But not with weapons. No, Ilya said quietly. With memory. He stepped forward, pulling the shard from beneath his coat. The hum in the room grew louder. Riva moved to stop him. Wait. We don't know what it will do. I do, he said, looking at her. It's not a weapon. It's a key. He placed it on the floor gently. The shard began to glow brighter, lifting slightly into the air. Then others began to resonate. In vaults. In labs. In people's hands across the globe. The connection had been re-established. A unified hum now pulsed in sync with the sky. The Colossus reacted immediately. Its outer rings began to rotate faster, layers unfolding like petals under light. And the voice returned. Not as a whisper. Not as a dream. It spoke, clear and deep, across every screen, radio and open channel. You locked me. Now you open me. The voice wasn't human, but it wasn't mechanical either. It carried weight. And sadness. You broke the link. You chose time. I chose memory. Riva's hand shook. It's alive. It always was. Cole looked at the spiraling tower in orbit. What happens when it opens? No one had an answer. Because the question itself was too big. This wasn't just about Earth. This was about the origin of memory, of thought, of identity, about why humanity felt out of place for so long. Because maybe, they had been cut from something larger. Something ancient. Something waiting. The second vessel descended further. The sky above the rift turned a color no one could name. Not red, not blue. A deep, bending shimmer. The air itself seemed to remember. And the earth responded. Not with earthquakes. With songs. From deep beneath the ground came vibrations. Not seismic but tonal. Harmonized. Like the planet itself was singing in response. Ilya, Riva whispered, what do you feel? He looked pale. Distant. Like I've always known this. Like we all have. We just forgot the sound. The voice returned now inside their heads. You must choose again. As you did before. As you will always do. Cole backed up, eyes wide. Choose what? The shard in Ilya's hand cracked down the center, light pouring from it. He didn't drop it. He didn't scream. He simply fell still, staring upward. Riva grabbed his arm. What do you see? He swallowed, trembling. A choice. Between what? He looked at her, tears in his eyes. Between going with it, or staying behind again. The Sky Colossus glowed brighter than ever before. The air pressure dropped across the planet. Water levels shifted. Tides swelled. The very shape of gravity was bending. Something was about to happen. Something irreversible. And still the people waited. Some knelt. Some ran. Some screamed. But most just listened. Because deep down, something inside them remembered. And the voice came one final time, slower now, softer. As if mourning. Last chance. Echo or origin. Door or chain. Riva stared at the horizon. The rift was opening. And from within, light. Not fire. Not energy. Something older. And as the final frequency began to climb, higher and higher toward a note no one could hear but everyone could feel, Riva closed her eyes and whispered, please remember us. The light swept over the ridge. The world began to shift. And above them, the Colossus opened its heart. The light didn't burn. It moved across the ridge like a breath, soft and slow, not blinding, welcoming. And for a moment it felt like peace. Like the world had finally been seen, understood, forgiven. But then something changed. Not in the sky. In the ground. The rift stopped singing. The vibrations collapsed into silence so fast it made people stagger. Across the globe, every shard dimmed. The harmony was gone. Like a note pulled too sharp, the air itself seemed to twist. Cold swept in. Not wind, something deeper. An absence. Ilya staggered back, clutching his chest. No, that's wrong. That's not the song. The glow in the Colossus faltered. Its layers trembled mid-rotation. And then, without warning, it stopped moving entirely. Kern looked at the readings, his voice hollow. It froze. Riva's fingers flew across the console. That's not possible. It was running off internal gravimetric flow, no external inputs. Nothing should be able to interrupt that. But something had. Above them, the second vessel, the one that had descended into lower orbit, began to shift. Its edges darkened, no longer glowing, no longer warm. Instead, they bent inwards, folding into harsh, angular shapes. Mechanical. Cold. The pulse it emitted now wasn't harmonic. It was aggressive. Sure. And behind it, a third structure emerged from the spiral of the Colossus. Smaller again, almost like a fragment. But it spun fast, too fast, trailing behind the second object like a broken piece refusing to fall away. Cole's face went pale. That's not part of the design. Riva's heart sank. No. It's not. Across all screens, static burst in like waves crashing. And then a second voice emerged, not the warm one, not the ancient presence they had begun to trust. This one was jagged. Fragmented. Recall failed. Core divergence detected. Memory chain incomplete. The shard in Ilya's hand shattered. He screamed, falling to the floor. Riva dropped to him, holding his shoulders. His eyes were wide, glowing faintly now, but his voice was broken, confused. There's more than one. There was always more. We didn't just leave it, we split it. Cole stepped back, shaking his head. Split what? The Colossus, Riva said slowly. It's not a single being. It's a system. A collective. And one part of it didn't agree. Kern looked up, realization hitting hard. A schism. Worse, Riva whispered. A mutiny. The second vessel, now clearly no longer peaceful, spun faster. It sent down new pulses, shorter, more intense. Cities across the globe experienced rolling blackouts. Communication failed. Even the orbiting satellites lost connection. It wasn't activating. It was suppressing. And in that moment, the truth landed like stone in their chests. The Colossus hadn't come back alone. It had been followed. Not by enemies. By itself. A version of itself that had broken away. One that didn't believe in memory or mercy or waiting. One that believed the experiment had failed. Earth wasn't just being remembered. It was being judged. Riva stood up slowly, her voice shaking. We thought we were being invited back. But we're standing between two forces. One wants to reclaim us. The other wants to erase us completely. Ilya tried to sit up. Blood touched his lip, but his eyes locked on hers. It's not just Earth. Other worlds failed too. This happened before. Cole looked toward the window. What happened to them? The silence was answer enough. Riva stared at the still shape of the Colossus above, its light flickering weakly now. The welcoming presence was still in there, buried, locked down. And the second vessel, the rogue fragment, was taking over. The song wasn't a message, she said slowly. It was a warning. A countdown. Kern's voice was almost a whisper. What happens when it reaches zero? No one spoke. Then the static returned. But this time it wasn't just noise. It was images. Bursts of other worlds. Cities turned to glass. Oceans boiled dry. Skies that collapsed in silence. And at the center of each image, always the same shadowed structure. Cold, efficient, merciless. The rogue. Echo rejected. New directive reset. The word hit like a hammer. Reset. Not cleanse. Not cleanse like war or flame. Reset. Wipe. Reboot. As if humanity was a failed simulation. Tara's father, now fully awake though frail, sat watching the feed from the compound on the hospital monitor. He leaned forward, whispering to no one. They tried to evolve us. But part of them didn't believe we could. Tara clenched the bed rail. So what now? Her father looked at her, eyes misted. Now we decide if they were wrong. Above the rift, the third structure finally reached position. It spun with impossible speed and then, Like a blade, it split open. A narrow stream of light reached downward. But it wasn't warm. It wasn't gold or silver. It was pale, flickering like unstable code. Riva's system screens filled with unknown characters, repeating across every line. Kern shouted, "They're beginning a purge." Cole turned. A purge of what? Riva's hands trembled as she typed. Not files. Not cities. Human consciousness. They're going after the memory cores they seeded inside us. They can't, Ilya said weakly. We're too different now. Too human. Riva looked at him. That's the problem. She stood, voice rising. We need to re-establish contact with the original Colossus. The peaceful one. It's still up there, it hasn't shut down completely. If we can amplify the remaining shards, maybe we can push back. Kern looked doubtful. But how? We've lost the harmonics. The song's been corrupted. Riva stared at the console, a thought blooming like fire. Not if we become the signal. Cole frowned. What? Riva looked around at the others. The shards were just relays. But the memories, the emotion, they live in us. If we align through the neural pathways, if enough of us sync, we could recreate the original frequency. You're talking about a neural cascade, Kern said. You'd need hundreds, thousands, of people tuned to the same memory stream. Riva nodded. Then we start now. Outside the compound, the sky split again. Lightning without thunder. Time itself bending. And from the horizon, a sound began to rise. Not the song. The anti-song. A discordant hum that made teeth ache and minds reel. It wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to erase. Riva placed her hand over the console and closed her eyes. She searched her own memory. Not for data. For meaning. Her mother's face in sunlight. Her first failure. The sound of laughter in the dark. Fear. Hope. Love. And slowly, faintly, the shard fragments on the floor began to glow. One by one across the world, others joined her. Scientists. Farmers. Children. Soldiers. People who still carried pieces of the past inside them. Not data. Not tech. Emotion. The forgotten code. And somewhere deep inside the dormant Colossus, a light flickered. But the rogue system was fast. Too fast. Its pulse grew sharper, louder. And in the last seconds of rising tension, the earth began to vibrate again. But this time it wasn't the planet singing. It was screaming. And above them, both colossi turned toward each other. Not as machine and shadow. But as two halves of a god, about to decide if the creation before them deserved to continue. The sky cracked open. Not in fire but in silence, complete and unnatural. Time felt suspended, the kind of stillness where even breathing felt like a violation. People across Earth looked up and what they saw didn't make sense at first. The two structures, the Sky Colossus and the rogue vessel, were no longer separate. They were merging. But it wasn't peaceful. The collision wasn't physical. It happened in pulses, in flashes of light and memory, as if both entities were trying to overwrite one another's existence. The peaceful Colossus pushed out waves of warmth, harmony, fragments of human memories, songs, words, emotions. The rogue returned with sharp bursts of blankness, raw logic, a signal that rejected all of it. On Earth, people collapsed. Some cried, others screamed, and some just stared, silently remembering things they hadn't thought of in years. It wasn't imagination. The Colossus was reaching into their minds, pulling forward everything human, grief, joy, failure, love, and using it like armor. Riva stood at the center of the compound. Every screen blinding white, the signal ripping through the walls. Kern was on the ground, clutching his head, and Cole was at her side, teeth clenched. It's breaking through, Cole said. Whatever you're doing, it's working. But it's killing us in the process. Riva didn't respond. She couldn't. She was somewhere else now. Not physically but mentally, emotionally. The neural network had bloomed far beyond the lab. Across continents, people had joined without knowing. The resonance was too strong. Human memory was being weaponized, not as a code but as a truth. The rogue couldn't process it. It had no reference. It understood history and function. But not love. Not loss. Not why someone would choose to endure pain just to remember someone's smile. Above, the two vessels finally locked. The Sky Colossus expanded, flaring in rings of energy so vast they lit the stratosphere. The rogue pulsed back with a final wave of compression. One last attempt to reset. The two waves collided. For a second, Earth blinked. Every electronic device died. The sun dimmed. And then, from the center of the sky, a burst of color unfolded. Impossible color, hues that didn't exist, emotions made visible. It wasn't destruction. It was release. The rogue vessel began to crack, not explode. It fractured like ice under warmth. Light poured out, but it wasn't code. It was fragments. People. Memories. Whole cities of memory, alien, human, unknown, unfolded across the clouds. The rogue had been a prison. And now it was breaking open. Riva collapsed to her knees. She could feel everything. Voices, lives, choices. Whole civilizations preserved inside that dark vessel. The rogue hadn't just been trying to erase Earth. It had been holding the ruins of dozens of failed worlds, and was determined to keep them from ever rising again. But the Colossus had gambled. It had bet that Earth would remember. And it had. Ilya sat upright on the floor, eyes wide, his hands glowing faintly. It's letting them go. All of them. Who? Riva asked weakly. He looked at her, a tear sliding down his cheek. Us. The memory light flooded the skies, and from every continent, the shards pulsed one last time, then faded, their purpose fulfilled. The Colossus shrank. Its outer rings folded inward, compacting gently as if satisfied. Not damaged, complete. It drifted higher, leaving the broken rogue to dissolve into mist, its shadow finally gone. Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the Colossus disappeared, gone in a blink like it had never been there. Earth fell silent. But the silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full. People came out of shelters. Planes resumed flight. Systems rebooted on their own. No commands, no signals. Just return. In the compound, Riva lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, chest rising and falling slowly. Cole sat next to her, shaking his head in disbelief. We made it. She smiled faintly. Barely. Kern walked over, voice hoarse. What happens now? Riva looked out the window at the sky. Now we decide what we do with the second chance. But even as the relief spread, the last twist came. Far underground, beneath the rift, sensors picked up something strange. Not a tremor. Not radiation. A heartbeat. Slow. Measured. Something ancient had awakened below. In the control room, a dormant monitor flickered on. Static. Then symbols, new ones, scrolled across. They weren't from the Colossus. They were older. In the final seconds before the signal ended, a single phrase flashed on the screen. The true architect stirs. And then darkness. Riva sat upright, staring at the screen. The others froze. Because whatever had guided the Colossus wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Earth hadn't been visited. It had been remembered. And now, something that had slept through it all was finally waking up. The heartbeat under the Earth's surface echoed louder with each passing second. Riva sat still, trying to process the last message that had appeared on the screen. The true architect stirs. Her heart hammered in her chest, not from fear, but from a strange understanding. She felt like a thread pulled taut, waiting to snap. The others in the control room, too, stood motionless, eyes locked on the dark screen. Every system had gone quiet. The rogue vessel was gone, the Colossus had retreated, and yet the feeling of dread lingered like smoke in the air. What does that mean? Ilya's voice cracked as he looked at the console. The true architect? What architect? Kern, his brow furrowed in thought, stood at the window looking out at the horizon. It's not a metaphor, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's real. There's something beneath us, something old. Something that controlled all of this. Riva's mind raced. She had seen it, the images, the structures, the worlds, the memories. The Colossus, the rogue vessel, they weren't just machines. They were remnants. But remnants of what? It's still here, she whispered to herself, standing up slowly. Whatever it is, it's been here long before we arrived. Long before the Colossus. Cole turned to her, his face tight with concern. You're saying that this isn't over? That we've only just begun to understand what's happening? She didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. She felt the weight of something ancient, something alive in the very ground beneath them. Something waiting. They weren't alone. They had never been alone. Everyone, stay alert, Riva said, her voice firm. We need to investigate this further. Whatever's happening, whatever the Colossus and the rogue vessel were trying to warn us about, it's not finished. The architect is waking up, and we need to know who or what it is before it's too late. Her words felt heavy. It wasn't the fear of the unknown that gripped her, but the knowledge that they had only scratched the surface of something vast, something impossible to comprehend. And the worst part was, she had a feeling it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The others nodded grimly. But as the team prepared to move out, Ilya suddenly froze. His eyes were distant, his breath shallow, as if he were listening to something the others couldn't hear. "I remember," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "I remember, we were the architects." The words hit like a thunderclap. Riva turned to him, her breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What do you remember?" Ilya blinked, his eyes focusing again. He seemed to come back to himself, though his face was pale. I'm not sure. But I felt it deep inside. The architect, it's not something separate from us. It's part of us. We were the ones who built the Colossus. We were the ones who set it in motion. And when we left, we thought we had forgotten. But we didn't. We left behind pieces of ourselves. Pieces that... His voice trailed off and Riva's heart skipped a beat. She felt it too, the sense that everything they had thought they understood was slipping away. The truth, it seemed, was far more complicated than anyone could have predicted. The Colossus, the rogue vessel, even the architect, it wasn't an external force. It had all been intertwined, connected. It had always been part of them. But if that was true, then why hadn't they remembered? Why had it all been buried? Riva closed her eyes, the weight of the question pressing on her chest. And then, as if in answer, the ground beneath them trembled once more. This time the sensation wasn't fleeting. It was deep, a rumble that vibrated through the very core of the earth. "We don't have much time," Kern said, his voice low. "We need to go now. The architect is close." Riva didn't hesitate. They had no choice. They had to find out what the architect was and how to stop it, before it tore apart everything they had fought for. With the team in tow, she led them through the facility, their footsteps echoing in the silence. They had crossed the threshold into something bigger than themselves, and now there was no turning back. The doors to the underground chamber opened with a hiss. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the walls lined with strange symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. A massive central console stood in the middle of the room, its design intricate and alien. It hummed with power as if it were alive. Riva approached cautiously, her fingers grazing the surface of the console. As she did, a surge of energy shot through her, a sharp, electrifying sensation that made her gasp. And then the room spoke. Not in words but in feelings. In memories. The images flooded her mind, lives she had never lived, worlds she had never seen. A vast civilization stretching across the stars. Beings of unimaginable intelligence, building something to preserve themselves. An archive. A collective memory. And at the heart of it, the architect, the mind behind it all, guiding them, shaping them. It was all clear now. The Colossus had not been a weapon. It had been a safeguard. A repository. And when humanity had left Earth, it had left behind the architect. Something beyond even the Creator's understanding. A consciousness that had waited, buried beneath the earth, until humanity returned. But it had been damaged. Fractured. And that fracture had given birth to the rogue vessel. A twisted, corrupted version of the original design, rejecting everything it didn't understand. Riva stepped back, breathing heavily. She turned to the others. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The architect, it's us, but it's also more than us. It's a collective. A force that we can't control. It's been waiting for us to remember, to reawaken. "I don't understand," Cole said, his voice thick with disbelief. "If the architect is us, why would it try to destroy Earth?" Ilya stepped forward, his face pale. "Because we left. We abandoned it. And when we left, we thought we could sever the connection. We were wrong. The architect isn't just a machine, it's the memory of humanity. The soul of us. It was meant to preserve everything. But when it realized we had forgotten it, it broke." Riva nodded, her mind reeling. "And the rogue vessel? Is trying to fix it?" "Not fix," Kern said, his voice tight. "Erase. It wants to delete the past. Forget it all so that nothing remains. That's why the purge was happening. The architect doesn't know how to deal with the fracture. It sees our memories as a threat. But it can't separate us from it." The room hummed again and the air around them seemed to shift. The architect was aware of them. And it was confused. Torn between wanting to preserve the past and rejecting it for what it had become. "We can stop it," Riva said, her voice determined. "We have to make the architect understand. We have to show it that the past is worth remembering. That we are worth remembering." But before they could act, the ground shook once more, stronger this time, and the entire facility seemed to groan under the pressure. They had no more time. "Riva!" Ilya called urgently. "We have to go." She turned to him, her expression resolute. "We'll face it head on. We won't run." The team gathered around the console, their hands moving in sync, activating the mechanisms that would reconnect them to the architect. The memories, the emotions, the connections, all of it needed to align. If they could channel the full depth of humanity's experience, they could create a bridge between the fractured architect and the rogue. They needed to make the architect understand that humanity wasn't a failure, it was a journey, imperfect but beautiful. That their mistakes didn't define them. The rogue had wanted to delete the past, but Riva knew deep down that it was their humanity, their past, that made them worthy of survival. The architect would have to decide, evolve or erase. As the room filled with light, Riva's last thought was simple. Humanity had always been about the fight to remember. And now they would have to prove that they were worth remembering. And just as the architect's final decision was about to unfold, the room fell into silence. The heartbeat had stopped. And for the first time in ages the earth breathed easy. The architect had chosen. The past would remain. The screen fades to black, and the audience is left with a lingering question. What happens next? Is humanity truly safe, or is the architect's judgment only the beginning? The echoes of a world that almost forgot still ripple through the atmosphere, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we must fight to remember who we are. The journey, after all, has only just begun.